Shalom, my friends. If you're struggling with money right now, if you're living paycheck to paycheck in America, worried about bills, stressed about your future, I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes because what I'm about to share with you has been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years. The richest wisdom about prosperity, wealth, and financial freedom doesn't come from Wall Street. It doesn't come from your local pastor telling you to give everything to the church. It comes from an ancient blueprint so powerful that when properly understood, it completely transforms how people build wealth, make decisions, and create generational abundance. Most churches have systematically hidden this knowledge, not out of malice, but out of misunderstanding. They've taken the Torah's radical wealth-building principles and twisted them into something that serves their institutions instead of serving you. Today, I'm going to expose what they don't want you to know. You're probably wondering, what could possibly be hidden in ancient Jewish texts that Wall Street hasn't already discovered? Here's the mind-blowing truth. The Torah contains a complete financial architecture that operates on different principles than everything you've been taught about money. While American capitalism is built on competition, anxiety, and fear of scarcity, the Torah's system is built on something completely different: divine order, spiritual alignment, and a truth so simple that billionaires have accidentally stumbled upon it without even realizing they were following Torah principles. Think about it. Why do certain people create lasting wealth while others win the lottery and lose everything in 5 years? Why do some entrepreneurs build empires while others with the same opportunities fail spectacularly? The difference isn't luck, it's not intelligence alone. It's understanding the architecture of how prosperity actually works. In the next 6 sections, I'm going to reveal the specific principles that religious institutions have kept from you. Principles that will completely rewire how you think about money, work, giving, and abundance. These aren't just spiritual concepts. They're practical, actionable systems that you can implement in your life today. Whether you're $50,000 in debt, struggling to make ends meet, or earning 6 figures but feeling spiritually empty and financially insecure, these principles will give you the roadmap to transform everything. This is the foundation that changed civilizations. This is what the wealthiest Jewish families have passed down for generations. And this is what's been kept from you. Let's go deeper. The first principle that churches absolutely do not want you to understand is the difference between the Torah's concept of giving and the modern church's concept of tithing. When your pastor tells you to give 10% of your income to the church, he's completely misrepresenting what the Torah actually teaches. The Torah never says give everything to one institution. In fact, the Torah's system of giving is radically different, and when understood correctly, it actually multiplies your wealth instead of depleting it. The Hebrew word for giving is nesina, which means to give strategically, not to give blindly. Every instance of giving in Torah is tied to a purpose, a season, and a return. This is not charity in the way Western churches understand it. This is investment in your own spiritual ecosystem. Here's what the Torah actually prescribes, and this is crucial. There were actually multiple forms of giving. The Maser Rishon, first tithe, went to the Levites. The Maser Sheni, second tithe, was for the poor and vulnerable in your own community, and the Maser Ani, poor tithe, was cyclical. But here's the hidden genius. This wasn't about making you poor. It was about creating a system of circulation that prevented wealth from stagnating. In America today, when churches demand your tithe, money flows up to the institution and rarely flows back to the congregation in practical ways. Your mortgage isn't paid. Your medical bills aren't covered. Your children's education isn't funded. But in the Torah's system, giving was tied to community well-being and relational wealth. If your neighbor was struggling, you helped them so they could become productive again. This wasn't welfare. This was wealth building for the entire community. The result? Communities flourished. People weren't trapped in cycles of poverty while institutions accumulated power. The practical application of this principle in modern America is revolutionary. You give strategically to people and purposes that create returns. You invest in education, your own or your children's, because education multiplies earning potential. You support family members in ways that build their capacity to earn, not their dependency. You give to causes that address the root causes of poverty, not just the symptoms. You tithe your time and talent to building your own business and expertise before tithing your money to anyone else. The Torah says in Proverbs 22:29, "Do you see someone skilled in their work? They will serve before kings." This is a direct instruction. Develop mastery, build value, and your financial position will automatically elevate. When you follow this principle instead of blind church tithing, something remarkable happens. You keep your capital working for your family's future while still contributing to community well-being. That's the principle churches hide, because it makes people independent instead of dependent on institutional religion. The second Torah principle that would destroy the American productivity cult is the sabbatical cycle, Shemitah. Every seventh year, the Torah commands rest from work, forgiveness of debts, and a reset of the financial system. Now, most American Christians have never even heard this exists in Scripture, and if they have, they dismiss it as irrelevant ancient law. But here's what's terrifying to institutions. The sabbatical cycle is actually a wealth multiplication system disguised as a spiritual practice. When you understand it, you realize that burnout, anxiety, and financial instability in America are largely caused by violating this principle. We live in a system that demands constant productivity, never-ending hustle, and the complete rejection of cyclical rest. The result? Exhausted people making poor financial decisions, health problems that drain savings, and spiritual depletion that makes us vulnerable to every financial scheme and conspiracy. The Torah's sabbatical cycle works like this. 6 years you work, produce, build, and accumulate, but in the seventh year, you rest completely. You don't plant, you don't harvest, you live off what you stored during the 6 years of production. During this seventh year, debts are forgiven, slaves are freed, and the land and the people are restored. This sounds financially insane to the American mind because we've been programmed to believe that rest equals poverty. But the opposite is true. The sabbatical teaches a profound economic principle. You cannot build sustainable wealth without cycles of restoration. Your body needs sleep or it breaks down. Your mind needs rest, or it becomes ineffective. Your finances need periodic resets, or they become toxic. In the decades before the 2008 financial crisis, Americans had completely abandoned any concept of financial cycles. We just kept consuming, borrowing, and producing without ever stopping to evaluate, restore, or reset. The result was catastrophic, but those who understood cycles, who built reserves during good times, who reduced debt strategically, who took breaks to reassess, they survived intact. The practical application for you right now is this. If you're struggling financially in America, one of the primary reasons is that you're violating the sabbatical principle. You're working yourself to exhaustion without strategic breaks to reassess and restore. The solution is to begin building cycles into your financial life. Every 6 months, take a financial Sabbath, review your spending, audit your debts, eliminate wasteful subscriptions, and restore your budget to health. Every year, plan a week of complete rest where you don't work, don't hustle, and don't check email. This isn't laziness. This is wealth-building strategy. When you're rested, your brain makes better decisions. When you're rested, you're not tempted by impulse purchases or desperate financial schemes. When you're rested, you can actually think strategically about your future. The Torah knew something that modern America has forgotten. Rest is a wealth-building tool, not a luxury for the rich. When you implement cycles of work and rest, your productivity during work periods increases, your decision-making improves, and paradoxically, you accumulate wealth faster than the person who's constantly exhausted and making panicked financial choices. The third principle that terrifies religious institutions is the Torah's teaching on legitimate multiplication. America is obsessed with get-rich-quick schemes, pyramid schemes, gambling, and investing in things you don't understand. The result? Millions of people lose fortunes every year chasing false prosperity. The Torah contains an entire framework for how wealth is actually multiplied, and it's so radically different from what you've been taught that it will sound almost boring, until you realize it actually works. The principle is called pru urvu, be fruitful and multiply. But it's not just about reproduction, it's about all increase, including financial increase. The Torah teaches that legitimate multiplication comes from value creation, not from extraction, manipulation, or luck. Here's what the Torah actually teaches about multiplication. First, there is skilled labor, using your God-given talents to create value that others will pay for. The Torah honors the craftsman, the builder, the farmer who produces real goods, not the speculator, not the person trying to get rich off other people's desperation. Second, there is prudent saving, putting aside reserves during times of abundance. Joseph in Egypt understood this principle. He stored grain during 7 years of plenty so his people could survive 7 years of famine. Third, there is compound growth through time and consistency, not get-rich-quick schemes. In Proverbs, which is part of the Torah's wisdom literature, it says, "The wealth of the rich is their fortified city, but poverty is the ruin of the poor." This isn't about luck. It's about build systems. Build a business system. Build a skill system. Build a financial system that works for you instead of constantly working against you. Fourth, there is ethical constraint. The Torah explicitly forbids charging interest to fellow community members. Exodus 22:25, forbids taking advantage of the poor, Exodus 22:26, and forbids fraud or deceptive weights and measures, Leviticus 19:35-36. This principle would devastate the modern American financial system because so much of modern wealth is built on extracting value from people who don't understand what they're getting into. The practical implication is transformative. If you want to build real wealth in America, you must reject the gambling mentality and adopt the value creation mentality. Instead of playing the stock market based on tips and hope, learn a skill so valuable that companies will pay you premium wages. Instead of trying to flip houses through speculation, become such a good property manager and investor that you create genuine value. Instead of buying cryptocurrency you don't understand, build a business that solves real problems for real people. The Torah's multiplication principle works because it's based on reality, not fantasy. When you create genuine value, when you build systematically, when you save prudently, and when you do business ethically, wealth multiplies naturally. The financial elite in America understand this principle even if they don't call it Torah. They build systems, they hire skilled people, they play the long game, and they refuse to get caught up in the desperate schemes that trap ordinary people. The churches don't teach this because it would require you to become independent and powerful in your own right, instead of dependent on the church for spiritual validation. The fourth principle that completely inverts American thinking about money is the Torah's teaching that you do not own your wealth. You are a steward of it. This is perhaps the most misunderstood principle in all of Scripture, and its misunderstanding has created spiritual sickness in American prosperity gospel churches. These churches teach that more money equals more blessing from God, which creates a false hierarchy where the wealthy are more favored and the poor are somehow spiritually inferior. The Torah teaches the opposite. In the Torah, wealth comes with massive responsibility. You are accountable to God for how you use every dollar. You are responsible for protecting the vulnerable. You are obligated to use wealth to build community, not to hoard it or to lord it over others. This is a radical accountability principle that would terrify most American billionaires because it demands moral examination of how wealth was accumulated and how it's being used. The Torah contains the law of Yovel, Jubilee, which occurs every 50 years and completely resets all property ownership. Debts are forgiven. Slaves are freed. Land returns to its original families. Why? Because the Torah recognizes a fundamental truth that America has rejected. Unlimited wealth. Accumulation creates social collapse. When wealth concentrates indefinitely in fewer and fewer hands, the society becomes unstable. The poor become desperate. Desperate people become dangerous, and the entire civilization destabilizes. The Jubilee principle is not communism, it's intelligent systems design. It recognizes that every generation deserves a fresh start, that family wealth shouldn't be locked in permanent dynasties, and that social stability requires periodic redistribution. This is why the wealthiest civilizations in history were those that built in mechanisms for wealth cycling. Rome during its republic, Venice during its golden age, the Jewish diaspora communities that prospered for centuries. And this is why America is becoming increasingly destabilized as wealth inequality reaches unprecedented levels. The practical application for your own life is this: stop thinking like an owner and start thinking like a steward. This completely changes your financial psychology. As an owner, you're always anxious about losing what's yours, always competing, always trying to extract maximum value. As a steward, you're focused on multiplying what's been entrusted to you, building something that lasts, and creating value that benefits others. A steward of $50,000 who builds it wisely into $200,000 and uses it to establish a family business is actually wealthier spiritually than an owner of $2 million who hoards it, stresses about it, and uses it for status symbols. The churches won't teach this because stewardship requires character and accountability, whereas ownership feeds ego and pride. When you adopt a stewardship mentality, something shifts in your financial decision-making. You stop making stupid purchases that temporarily feel good. You stop investing in things you don't understand. You become incredibly careful about ethical sources of income because you're accountable for every dollar. And paradoxically, this accountability creates more security, not less, because you're building financial systems based on integrity instead of manipulation. The fifth Torah principle that modern America has completely perverted is the dignity of work. The Torah opens with God creating and God rested. But before creation was complete, God commanded humanity to work the garden. Work is not a curse. Work is not punishment for sin, despite what many churches teach based on a misreading of Genesis 3. Work is the fundamental human calling, the way we co-create with the divine, the way we build value, and the way we maintain dignity. In America today, we've created a culture where some people think they're too good for certain types of work, where people despise their jobs instead of approaching them with excellence, and where the hustle culture has made work into something dehumanizing instead of something dignifying. The Torah's perspective would completely rehabilitate American attitudes toward work. The Talmudic principle states, "Who is wealthy? One who is happy with their portion." But the Torah also teaches that part of being happy with your portion is doing excellent work with what you have. The book of Proverbs, which is part of Torah wisdom, is filled with teachings about the diligence of the ant, the laziness of the sluggard, the honor that comes to those who work with excellence. In Proverbs 22:29 it says, "Do you see someone skilled in their work? They will serve before kings." This is not metaphorical. This is practical. When you develop mastery in your work, your economic value increases dramatically. You become irreplaceable. You can command higher wages. You can transition to positions of leadership and influence. The person working at McDonald's who approaches every shift with excellence, who learns every system, who treats every customer with respect, that person will not stay at McDonald's. They will be promoted, recruited, or will have the confidence to start their own venture. But the person who approaches work with resentment and minimal effort, that person will stay stuck exactly where they started. Here's the practical transformation. If you're struggling financially in America, you likely have a broken relationship with work. Either you're doing work that drains you and you hate, or you're approaching whatever work you have without excellence or engagement. The Torah's solution is to reclaim dignity in your labor. If you're in a job you hate, start planning your exit by building a new skill while you're still employed. If you're doing work begrudgingly, commit to excellence for 90 days and watch what happens to your opportunities and your earnings potential. Stop looking for the easy path. There isn't one. Stop looking for the boss or the system to validate you. Validation comes from mastery. The richest people in the world got there because they fell in love with mastery in their field, whether that's software, construction, medicine, or business. They weren't looking for shortcuts. They weren't waiting for handouts. They developed expertise that became so valuable that abundance followed naturally. This is the work principle that churches don't teach because it would require people to become empowered and self-reliant instead of dependent on God or the church to rescue them. The sixth and final principle is the Torah's emphasis on generational wealth building. While American culture is obsessed with individual success, the self-made person, the entrepreneur, the rags to riches story, the Torah operates from a fundamentally different assumption. You are building for your children and grandchildren. The Torah is obsessed with intergenerational thinking. Laws exist to protect family property. Teaching is commanded. You shall teach these things to your children, and to their children, and to their children's children. The entire structure of Torah inheritance law exists to keep family wealth intact and to ensure that knowledge, values, and resources flow from generation to generation. This is why Jewish families that have maintained Torah principles have consistently built and maintained wealth across centuries, while other groups rise and fall in single generations. The American approach to family wealth is actually quite primitive compared to the Torah's framework. Most Americans have no written financial plan. They don't teach their children about money management. They don't have clear inheritance structures, and as a result, families go through cycles of wealth and poverty. A generation builds wealth, the next generation squanders it without understanding how it was built, and by the third generation, they're back to poverty. This is so common that financial advisors call it shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. The Torah prevents this through a completely different approach. It combines financial systems, inheritance law, property protection, debt forgiveness, educational systems, constant teaching of values and principles, and relational systems, family responsibility, community accountability, intergenerational mentorship. When a Jewish family maintained these Torah principles, wealth wasn't just accumulated, it was preserved and multiplied across generations because each generation understood how to steward it, add to it, and pass it forward. The practical application for your family is revolutionary. Stop thinking about money as something you earn and spend in your lifetime. Start thinking about money as something you're building for your lineage. This completely changes your financial decisions. Instead of spending $40,000 on a depreciating car, you're thinking about whether that $40,000 could be invested in real estate or a family business that becomes an asset your children inherit. Instead of working a job that pays well but depletes you spiritually, you're thinking about building a skill, business, or property that can become generational income for your family. Instead of assuming your children will figure it out themselves, you're actively teaching them financial principles, business principles, and values principles starting from childhood. This is exactly what wealthy families do. They build systems, not just income. They build knowledge, not just assets. And they build values that ensure each generation knows how to steward wealth, not just that wealth exists. The churches don't teach this because family-centered wealth building means people become economically independent and don't need the institution. But for you, this principle is the foundation of building lasting abundance for yourself, your children, and your grandchildren. Shalom. My friends, let me tie this all together. You now understand 6 principles from the Torah that churches have systematically hidden from you, not out of malice necessarily, but because these principles create independent, empowered people instead of dependent, institutional people. The principle of strategic giving teaches you to invest your resources wisely and build your own family's future. The sabbatical cycle teaches you that rest and reflection are essential to wealth building, not obstacles to it. The multiplication principle teaches you to build through value creation and mastery, not gambling and speculation. The stewardship principle teaches you that wealth comes with accountability and responsibility, which actually creates more security, not less. The work principle teaches you that dignity and abundance come through excellence in your labor. And the family wealth system teaches you to think generationally and build legacy, not just income. These aren't just spiritual concepts. They're practical systems that have built and maintained wealth across thousands of years and across Jewish communities worldwide. If you're struggling financially right now in America, if you're buried in debt, if you're terrified about your future, I want you to understand that your situation is not a reflection of your worth or your intelligence. Your situation is a reflection of the systems you've been taught to follow. You've been taught to spend, to consume, to compete, to gamble, to give to institutions blindly, and to never rest. You've been taught that work is something to escape from, not something to master. You've been taught to think individually instead of generationally. These systems were designed to keep you dependent, anxious, and unstable. But the moment you understand the Torah's principles, the moment you shift from these broken systems to the systems that have actually built wealth across history, everything changes. You don't need a miracle. You don't need the lottery. You don't need a rich relative. You need to understand and apply the architecture of prosperity that the Torah reveals. And that's completely available to you right now. So here's what I want you to do. Take one of these 6 principles and implement it this week. If you're not resting, take a Sabbath. If you're tithing blindly to a church, redirect that giving strategically to people and purposes that multiply value. If you're working a job you hate without developing mastery, commit right now to becoming excellent at what you do or to building a new skill. If you're thinking only about yourself, start thinking about what you want to build for your children and grandchildren. If you're gambling financially instead of building, commit to one legitimate investment or business idea. If you're hoarding or stressing about money, shift to a stewardship mentality where you focus on multiplying what's entrusted to you. One principle this week, implemented with intention, because that's how transformation happens, not all at once, but through consistent application of true principles. The Torah's wealth is waiting for you. All you have to do is understand it, believe it, and live it. Shalom.